It's good to see you all, especially today. It's so many old friends, some new faces. We are delighted that you can join us as we celebrate the Center's 25th anniversary this year. For those who are new to the Center, I am Jim Ferris. I'm a professor in the Saul Price School of Public Policy. And for the last, 25 years, I had the privilege and good fortune to lead the Center on Philanthropy and Public Policy, and the endless opportunities to work, learn, and be inspired by many of you in this room, as well as to shine a spotlight on philanthropy and its impact in our communities here in LA, across the state, and the nation. On behalf of the Center's Board of Advisors, I am pleased to welcome you to this Distinguished Speaker Series luncheon. And what a better way to mark this anniversary than to welcome back my good friend, Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation. Welcome, Darren. Thanks for coming back. He's one of our, it's like Saturday Night Live. He's been here a lot over the years. And Darren, I recall a conversation I had with our good friend Irene Hirano-Inouye. We're on our way to New York. We had been talking about Ford, about the Center. And I asked her, well, who should I talk to at Ford? And she just looked at me and she says, I don't know, let me think about it. And then I get an email, call Darren. So I did. And we had a great conversation. A few months later, you were appointed the president of the Ford Foundation. Irene was the board chair. And I said, well, after a year, come on out to LA and we'll like to hear all about it. So here we are as you're about to step down. And we thought, Cindy and I thought the best way to have our 25th anniversary distinguished speaker was to invite Darren back, because you've done so much since your time to 2 decades or more in philanthropy and the last so many years at the Ford Foundation. So we're really excited you're here. Let me just sort of remind people, if you're not aware, of Darren. He's a change maker in philanthropy for over 2 decades. He's been at the helm of the Ford Foundation for over a decade, 12, 13 years, who's counting? After serving as Ford's vice president for education, creativity, and free expression. Previously, he was served as vice president at the Rockefeller Foundation. And throughout his career in philanthropy at 2 of the most iconic, storied American foundations, he has built on his life experiences, making big bets and leading boldly. He has not only shaped the work of these foundations, but through his voice and action, he has worked to build a new gospel of wealth, from generosity to justice, by investing in ideas, institutions, and individuals. Darren has been instrumental in many areas. I could just name a few. Impact investing. The field was really born in those days at Rockefeller and carried on in your work at Ford. You've not only taken your advice and invested over $1 billion in mission-aligned investments. You've worked to create the Impact Investing Alliance, and you really advanced the field. It's been remarkable as the field has changed. And then during the pandemic, you and some of your colleagues advanced this idea of social bonds, borrowing money to do great things at a critical moment in the nation's history. In fact, I think you inspired our friend Bob Ross to do the same at the California Endowment, if I recall the conversations, right? Earlier, you had forged A remarkable grand bargain in Detroit with your colleagues from Knight, Kresge, the Southeast Michigan Community Foundation, and basically helped the city of Detroit come out of bankruptcy. And what a trajectory Motown has been on ever since. It's remarkable. But you looked inside as well. You had this initiative Build, where you decided you were going to invest in the individuals on the front lines of social change and invest for the long term. And Hillary and Kathy led that work, but it was inspired by you. I could go on about arts and social change, disability rights. It's a long list. There's a biography on your program. But, I just want to thank you for all you have done to advance the field of philanthropy. And we're really excited to hear your exchange with Cindy today. And we hope you best of luck in your next adventure, which includes, I think, leading the National Gallery of Art. So, Godspeed. I have a great pleasure of working with Cindy. Lots of phone calls here and there. And she's just completed her 10th year at the Bloomberg Foundation. And what I've come to know is she has all these superpowers at bringing people together. And I just wanted to acknowledge your work with some of your colleagues from Philanthropy and Fire Aid in distributing $100 million, 75 to date, in the response and recovery and rebuilding of LA. Which is really incredible because you still ran the Annenberg Foundation while you stood up Fire Aid LA. And so thank you, the community thanks you. Now you can.
Thanks. I'll be brief because I think everybody wants to enjoy this wonderful feast that we're having right now. But thanks, Jim. You're too kind. And let me take a moment to salute you and your 25 years of service as the founder and the force behind this center. It would not exist if not for you and your vision, your leadership and your vision. There is no better steward for all of us, an advocate for this philanthropic sector here in Los Angeles, but also across the country. You spoke of Detroit. We know of your affiliation with our great friend Rip Rabson at the Kresge Foundation. And these are such challenging times for all of us, for many institutions, including the philanthropic sector. So thank you, Jim Ferris, for your through research, through thought leadership, through your invaluable support of family philanthropies. And I also want to salute Alex. I don't know where you are, Alex. You're out here somewhere. I always lose you at these things. There you are. The center's deputy director who has helped lead this strong institution. And I also want to recognize the center's faculty and senior fellows who are here today. It takes a village, as we all know, from that overused term, but it really does. And it will be and continue to be great for the next 25 years, so Godspeed. I'm pleased to also acknowledge the Center's Board of Advisors, past and present, the vital philanthropic partners and the executives, my colleagues, the executives of the LA Foundation Leadership Group, so many of you in this room today, on a day in our city under great challenge where we need to be together. How could this happen on this day? That we're all together in this room as our city navigates yet another challenge, not even 6 months after January 7th. How could we find ourselves here? But we'll endure, and we're going to ask Darren to reflect on that for us and how we go through these times. But we have each other, and that's great. And that LA Foundation Leadership Group, Jim, we all thank you for that. It has served such a great purpose to all of us. And then, of course, the one that's particularly close to my heart, The center was on the ground floor of kicking off the Women in Leadership in Philanthropy, and we did it at the Annenberg Estate at Sunnylands, and I think Ambassador Doherty is here today with us, the Director of Retreats. We did this about 2 years ago. We did it again this year, and we'd like to think that that is the future in many ways of philanthropy, women leading institutions, women working with women, giving away money, and we really seized on that, did some research with the center, and we're full steam ahead with that initiative, and we're really happy about that. So thank you to all for your dedication. If you're not a member yet or a financial supporter, here's the pitch, everybody, of this center. I would really like to encourage you. Now's a good time for all of us as the sector navigates through these bumpy times for the next outstanding 25 years. Please think about joining. Please think about coming together with the center as a place that really is not just of research, but it also is of community and comfort when we need it. So before we turn to our feature discussion today, Jim went through a resume of our great guest. No more resumes, no, because I really want to talk about how many people in this room has Darren Walker helped? Can you raise your hands? Yeah. So we know that that's called friendship, and that's called dedication, and that's called finding time in a busy schedule to turn around and say, I'm there for you, and that's what you do for all of us, and we are so grateful. In fact, the Time 100 essay called you the perpetually sunny Darren Walker. Well, we love that because we live in the land of sun some days. But to all of us in this great city of angels, you are much more than that to us. You are truly the magically talented angel who at one time or another has helped all of us in this room and beyond. Because you've helped our cultural institutions here in Los Angeles, you've helped our civic challenges here in Los Angeles, and you have been for us, with us in the nation's second largest city, and we thank you so much for that. You're not just a magically talented executive and visionary, you're a good friend. So we thank you, and I'm so glad you're here today. Welcome to Los Angeles, and thank you. So maybe I'll start there. I think Jim did an adequate resume biography. I think you've had enough. But,
Enough.
But we are so proud of our diversity in this city. We are so proud of how we accommodate outsiders that we need desperately to make this city run, to make this state run, to make this country run. And what we have seen over the weekend has been such a challenge to all of us. And we're a city known for its diversity and a spirit of hope all of the time. But we're suffering right now, all of us. I am certainly, like everybody else probably in this room, feeling deeply disappointed on the set of circumstances that have occurred over the weekend here. So with that in mind, it couldn't be a better time to have you reflect for us on what we should be thinking, what we should be feeling, what can we do here in Los Angeles at this time of challenge.
Thank you, dear friend, for inviting me, you and Jim, the inimitable James Ferris. Good afternoon, Los Angeles.
Yes.
It is wonderful to be here in this magical place called Los Angeles that for some reason has always captured the imagination of not only America, but the world. I was just in Paris and I was at the Hockney show at the Vuitton Museum, and the pictures that Hockney did when he discovered Los Angeles were the showpieces of the exhibition of his life. And it revealed why this British man who grew up in the sort of rainy Britain of the post-war And how coming to Los Angeles transformed his life and revealed for him a world that was simply magical. And it's a metaphor for this city in some way, because Los Angeles and this region has been one of those places full of mythology, of course, but also, as you say, the kind of place that is unique in the American landscape for being always open, always evolving, always innovating, and iterating on its own identity. Never feeling that, as many of the Rust Belt cities, we would call them today, the cities in the Midwest, always felt that they had something to prove to New York and Boston and Philadelphia. Los Angeles never really took on that. It's why when you visit Detroit or Cleveland or St. Louis, you see everything there is a replication of something in New York or Boston. The architects are Stanford White, and the same architects who the landscape is done by Olmsted, because Olmsted did Central Park. The museums were, you could just go down the list. The collections, or the collections that mimicked the collections of the museums. So the Fords and the Chryslers bought the same things the Boston Brahmins bought for their museums. And then you get to LA. LA was never about emulating Boston or New York. LA, from the very beginning, it seems, was very content to be something different on the American landscape, which has always fascinated me. And so we come to today, where I think there is no doubt that for any of us who have a modicum of humanity, what we saw over the weekend and what we are experiencing on a daily basis is not an assault on our nervous systems, because it feels like an assault on our nervous systems and our spirits to be confronted with what we must deal with on a daily basis. And yet, here we are in community. And I actually think the reason there's such a great turnout today is not because me. I think it's because you all need each other in this community to be in community. My chief of staff texted and said, well, given what we're watching on TV, and isn't the California Club downtown? We should be prepared. You need to be prepared for this to be canceled, because it's downtown LA. And yet here we are. I think that speaks volumes about the commitment, the civic commitment to community as Los Angeles sees community, which, as you say, has at its core the idea of diversity. Now, while some might wish to outlaw the word diversity, I think it's hard to imagine America without the word diversity in it, because the American experiment has been about diversity. It's why we are so unique in the landscape of the world. It's why other countries look at this country and say, how is it that they have these people from all over the world who have come to this singular place? There's no place like it in the world where people of African heritage, Latino heritage, Scandinavian heritage, all of these people have made a place called America. That's why when people talk about we're the beacon of the world and why, that's why the world looks at us and says, how do they make that work? We could never make that work in Germany or France or anywhere in Asia or anywhere in Africa. And so diversity is something you stand for, and you in this city should proudly have as your moniker, and understand that there are challenges with diversity.
So I had to let you go on and on about that because we need that today. So thank you. But I want to just push a little bit further on this idea of you're sitting in front of a great group of philanthropic leaders who just have, come off the heels. We're not even 6 months in of January 7th, and now this. Can you just imagine yourself heading a foundation now in this city? And what is it you're saying to yourself to keep going through this?
Listen, I think for all of us, when I think about the pandemic, when I think about, there were so many moments over my years. First of all, we are the only sector in American society whose work is the business of hope. We don't have a P&L. We don't have a return on equity. We don't have all of those things that, for the most part, the rest of the country deals with as their metrics or their North Star. For us, we are literally in the business of hope. If you've ever done a site visit, if you've ever gone to an exhibition you supported, if you've ever spent time with fellows and scholarship recipients of our work, these people have been given hope and the capacity to believe in themselves, to believe in their future, to believe in their community, to believe in their artistic practice. We help people by liberating them, allowing them to dream. And so for me, when you say, how do we deal with what we're dealing with? We're in the business of hope. We have no choice. There is no choice for us. There is no choice for me but to be hopeful. Part of that is my own journey. Part of that is knowing that I stand on the shoulders of people who had far less privilege than I could ever, my family could never have imagined. My illiterate grandparents could never have imagined living with the privilege I live with. And so it would be a disservice. It would be disrespectful for me as I think about the ancestors, as I think about what, all the way back to the beginning, Black people, my ancestors, believed in this country. They had hope for America. And yet they knew in their lifetimes that America would never be fully America, and yet they persevered. Fannie Lou Hamer persevered. Langston Hughes wrote in that great poem, Let America Be America Again, the opening stanza, let America be America again. America never was America to me. And yet he ends by saying, but oh yes, one day America will be. He was speaking to me. He was saying, I will never, living in this little hovel in Harlem, have the kind of justice that I would like to see in my lifetime. But one day. And so Langston Hughes was talking to me. And it would be disrespectful of me now to say, I give up, or I don't believe in America. When I get in a car after this and go to the Montage at Laguna to interview someone at a conference for me to say, oh, I can't be hopeful. It's so bad out there. It's not a choice.
You know, Darren has a book coming out in the autumn called The Idea of America, I think, which we just love that. So you obviously are going to seize on your incredible career in philanthropy. So I'm not going to ask you to pick your favorite or the one you're most proud of course, unless you want to, of the work that you've done, the Jim outlined. But maybe something where you took on a subsequent challenge that you might want to share with our colleagues here, how you did this, how you sort of navigated through it, how you incorporated hope and perseverance in that through your time at the Ford Foundation. Anything that...
I mean, there's been a lot that's occurred through the work of collective action at the foundation. But absolutely the thing I'm most proud of is our work in Detroit and the rapprochement with the Ford family. There's no doubt that I was 2 months into being president, and the bankruptcy judge calls, and I go to Detroit, and the situation, as you all know, there with the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history. And when the judge asked me to sort of chair this philanthropy committee to do the work to help raise the money, it really was Rip and Alberto and all our friends who we know well who did the work. But the satisfaction I have is that it is an example of how philanthropy can play a truly transformational role if we allow ourselves to do it. And the first part of that was sitting around a table and everyone saying, my board won't approve a grant for a bankruptcy. I mean, which is what everyone did. Mm-hmm. I mean, we focus on children and families. We focus on the environment. What do you mean a bankruptcy? We were able to suspend our belief in what we could do, which is essential. And the cascading effect of that was not only saving the museum, which was important, but very importantly, that got underreported, saving the pensions of thousands of workers who were primarily black and brown, working class Detroiters whose pensions had been pilfered away, and the sorts of things that happened were appalling. And so the ability to help the city rebound. And then finally, for me personally and the Ford Foundation, which we had never, as an institution, we could never fully embrace the Fords. We never embraced the Fords. There was not a visual image of Henry Ford in the Ford building. There was no picture. On the website, it only said that we were founded by Henry and Edsel Ford and that we are no longer affiliated with the Ford Motor Company, the Ford family. I found this very problematic and very arrogant. And so the opportunity to meet with Bill Ford and the family and ultimately
Why didn't it happen for all those years? Excuse me for interrupting. What happened for those in family foundations and family legacies? Why was it Darren Walker that had to come
Well, it
along?
wasn't Darren Walker. If you really want to know, I think the Fords, like a lot of families of great wealth, are complicated. And it was among all of the foundations, the large legacy foundations, our donor was the most problematic. When your donor is the most notorious anti-Semite and a known racist, it is hard for some people to situate him. It's not hard for me to situate Henry at all. Henry is complicated, just like this country. And there is greatness in his story and what he did as an industrialist, as a capitalist, as the person to the first industrialist to recognize inequality and pay his workers so they could afford the products they were making. All of that was amazing and courageous and brave and contributed to this country's greatness. And then, of course, there was the dark side of Henry, and which is well documented. But to me, Henry's a metaphor for America. So I fully embrace Henry. The foundation couldn't. And because when he left in 1976, and the way he left by sort of the day of the board meeting, telling the trustees, and his PR people had already put it in the New York Times, and it was deeply embarrassing to McGeorge Bundy and the trustees. There was just a lot of residual bitterness. And even within the family, Henry and his brothers, William Clayford, Benson, his sister Josephine, like lots of siblings, there was complexity. And so things never got back on track. And so when I became president, I always felt, I knew that one of the things I wanted was to be able to figure out a way to have a reconciliation, which they were eager to do. And Martha Firestone Ford, who's the great matriarch of the family, fully embraced me when I went to see her the first time, and now, several years on now, since 2019, we've had Henry Ford III on the board, and he's just an amazing trustee. And certainly, I think we now have instantiated into our system that there will always be a Ford on the board, which I think is good for us.
Great, congratulations. I want to talk about the arts for a minute. I'm going to borrow this New York Times, because the other day I got up, and as most of us, a lot of us in this room, put our hands on the New York Times or the LA Times pretty much after we awake. And there was a story about LACMA's new project that Michael's got over at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and it began to talk about LACMA joining a wholesale re-examination of the traditional Eurocentric, white male-dominated canon that is currently underway at institutions around the United States that historically marginalized other voices and perspectives. It goes on to talk about MoMA, it goes on to talk about the Met, and all I could think of was you, because of all your work that you have done in this area in terms of really urging these museums to come to terms with their board membership, with the way they're functioning, you have an extraordinary influence on the changing of our arts institutions and leadership in this country, certainly through your voice. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I believe museums are among the most important institutions in our democracy. They're educational institutions first. I mean, most museums have an educational charter, and they have a critical role to play because museums play back to us who we are as a society, as a civilization. And for much of our history in this country, museums and other organizations, cultural organizations, played back to us part of who we are. And they did that very, very well. But they also left out critical parts of the American narrative, of the global narrative of art history. And my advocacy has been not to discredit museums. In fact, I believe in museums. They are essential. And I want them to be excellent. I've always argued not for DEI, but for excellence. Because I believe in our society, diversity is a critical ingredient for excellence. I believe LACMA will be a more excellent museum. I certainly, having been at the Met last week for the opening of the Rockefeller wing, the reinstallation of that wing so that this notion of primitive is rooted out of the canon of art history is important. And I think we Americans have embraced hierarchies in ways that have done a disservice to our democracy. And in fact, today, one of the reasons among the institutions that the public doesn't trust are cultural institutions, all institutions, but in part because we're seen as elitists. We're seen as not serving, reflecting them.
We've left people out.
We've absolutely left people out, and the narratives that we tell are insufficient. The Metropolitan Museum only recently, in the American wing of the Met, installed Native American art. So you could see Georgian furniture. You could see Peale and Gilbert Stuart paintings. I mean, you could see, but the Native American art was in what used to be the primitive wing, which was the Michael Rockefeller wing.
Right.
And so I believe we will be better, we will be more excellent when we are more inclusive of excellence, right? And so I reject when some critics say that this is watering down the standards of our great museums. Mm-hmm. I think the Met is a much greater museum, and I'll use mine. I mean, the National Gallery of Art.
I was about to ask.
Where we have literally had, you can count on two hands in the history of the National Gallery, the number of exhibitions of women, and on two fingers, the number of exhibitions of African American artists in Washington, D.C.
And I think you brought one of them there with
yes,
Wallace Annenberg.
With Wallace Annenberg's very big check,
Yes.
thank you very much. And that made a huge difference to, we are a better museum. We are fulfilling our educational mission, and by every indicator of success of a great museum, critical review, educational programs, new revenue, new populations coming to the museum, the scholarship and the catalog, every one of those are the indicators, traditional indicators of excellence. Every one of these shows, from Kerry James Marshall to Lorna Simpson to Afro-Atlantic Histories, has met that. And when you look at what LACMA is doing, among the many brilliant things I would say about Michael, who I know is so disruptive and can drive some arts patrons out of their minds, he has been the embodiment of Los Angeles. The embodiment of taking an idea of a traditional museum on Fifth Avenue and blowing it up and saying, this is the way we do it in LA. And believe me, Michael Govan could have come back to New York and run a big museum a long time ago. And yet, he has persisted in saying there's only one place I want to lead a museum, and it's Los Angeles.
All right, so is Darren Walker going to go to this version in the 21st century of Washington, D.C., and blow that museum up? What are you going to do?
The National Gallery does not need to be blown up. The National Gallery needs to fulfill the mission Mr. Mellon wrote for it in 1936.
Right.
And that mission was one of service to the American people, of a great art museum worthy of the American people. And so when we think about that, I don't think we need to blow anything up.
But Darren, how do you go into that situation when you've got Lonnie Bunch at the Smithsonian going through his own bumpy ride at the moment? You have the National Portrait Gallery woman last week. You have this whole set of circumstances that we can talk about for hours, but let's not. But how do you go into that environment right now in that very position with our National Gallery?
You go into it by being principled and pragmatic. If excellence is our North Star, we need to hold on to that and have a narrative and a program that reflects that, and not allow others to label you, caricature you, turn you into something you are not. I think we, and I say we, and I was talking to my good friend Bob Ross this morning over breakfast about this. We progressives, and I proudly am a progressive,
right,
we have seeded these ideas of excellence, of greatness. I mean, these words, we've seeded them and let others take those words. And I'm not willing to cede those words. I'm not willing to cede patriotism. I'm not willing to cede pride in America. All of those things, or love of country, these things that we secularites in New York have seemingly wanted to, I think it's critical. And I think we have to use that language and own it and enliven it with the very things we are talking about.
Instead of the word democracy all the time.
Well, I like the word democracy.
Well, we all do. I mean,
And I want the word to be fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to, I am not going to fall on the sword over DEI. I'm not going to get into an ideological, that's not where I live. The gray space is where I live, which is where problems get solved and real work gets done. But yeah, it's very hard when there are days when you feel like we are careening towards something very unfamiliar. And if we're students of history, we know this doesn't end well. And so what are we to do about that?
Yeah.
If we know it doesn't end well, then what are we to do?
Pluralism, you wrote about it. It got different reactions. Were you surprised, first of all, at the reaction?
Well,
when you
co-authored so I co-authored a piece with a group of conservative foundations about philanthropic pluralism. This was several years ago. And why, although the Ford Foundation may not agree with Bradley or Koch, we were together in this idea that this country needs philanthropic freedom and philanthropic pluralism, and that we need to respect that, and that we need to, in philanthropy, lock arms in defense of and in the promotion of this sector. I was disappointed in the extreme backlash from the left that I did that. I was disappointed that some of my own staff questioned my integrity because I signed on to it. But again, I come back to the things I said in my first address to the staff, as I said to them at a town hall discussing this. We have to be principled and pragmatic. Pragmatism is what led me to organize that, and I would do it again, because at the end of the day, we need to have a sector that is strong and that is resilient to calls for more taxation, which, if we are to get out of this current proposal, at least for the Ford Foundation, of a 10%.
We're talking about
tax.
the excise tax,
Yeah,
of
the
course,
excise
in the
tax
bill.
on net income for the large foundations, $5 billion and more, would be 10%. It will have a profound impact on our long-term financial. We'll be fine, but the actual giving will be impacted. So if it takes a partnership with the Koch Foundation, I'll sign them up.
What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I think,
Do you think it will
it's in
land
the
the
Senate.
10%?
It's in the Senate. We know that the negotiations are a mess right now. And the House has firmly been clear that they want the tax as written. It will be hard to reverse, to go back to the 1.35%. I mean, I think hopefully if we could get a 5% or get some number negotiated, but that's the best we're going to do. And if we get anything, it's not going to be because of the Ford and MacArthur Foundations. It's going to be because of the conservatives who have influence with the Senate Finance Committee.
And money.
And the
Lots
money.
of money
and the
to
currency
pay candidates.
to have their calls returned.
Yeah.
Because the leadership of those committees couldn't give a rat's ass about the Ford Foundation. In fact, don't like the Ford Foundation.
Have we passed, by the way, the fear or the expectation, I should say, of philanthropic leaders getting called to the Hill, much in the way the university presidents did, about the sector at all? There was a great worry earlier in the year that could happen, and being asked to explain, the way the sector works and so forth. Do you think we've sort of passed over that?
No. I don't think for those of us who would be the targets.
Yeah, that's why I ask you,
I don't
because
think
your name was
my name is, not my name, but the Ford Foundation is
That's what I mean.
always at the top of the list, and we remain at the top of the list of targets. And so we presume that at some point we will be called. And I think it's important just to understand. I mean, as you and I have talked about this, I've sat through enough preparation for these hearings to understand the value of them and why they are often designed for theater. And some member or members of Congress have written a script and a piece of theater and need you, because you've been cast, and need you to turn up and to perform the role you've been cast in. And so you just have to understand that that's what's at play. And so if they have written a story, and the story is that there are 3 women university presidents who are anti-Semites and clueless, they just need them to show up and perform. And the audience gets what they want the audience to get.
So in this preparation, do you think the sector is really thinking forward to the times we're living, where you have a State of the Union address that was all performance and guests and little boys with uniforms and suffering from cancer and all that? I mean, are we thinking as a sector that?
I think my concern about the sector, and again, I live in a sector. I live with large progressive foundations and large progressive donors. So I don't pretend to have my finger on the pulse of anything but that. And the staffs and nonprofits these groups support. And my concern is that we have not fully understood what is happening in America, meaning the profound impact of inequality, the economic system that has marginalized far too many Americans, and particularly working class white Americans, and the impact of that on our politics. And even though we might have funded some of the seminal, I remember 10 years ago giving a talk based on some work by Princeton economists on what was happening to working class white households in terms of well-being. And just looking at that and saying the implications for our democracy, as a foundation committed to democracy, we've got to pay more attention to that trend. I don't think we have, and I think we have been too smug and too easily ready to attribute all of what's happening that we don't like to racism or misogyny. Now, there is racism and misogyny in this country, but that doesn't fully explain what's happening. It's more than that. It is a sense of precarity that people feel, and a greater sense of hopelessness and a loss of optimism. And that's what inequality does. Right? This is why, my book and everything has been so focused on that. And I remember when the only reason I'm mentioning this is because there's a story because why I mentioned it. But when 60 Minutes did Leslie Stahl did my profile, and when they, at the beginning of at the top of the hour, they do 15 seconds of each interview. And I had said during the interview, a day-long interview with Leslie Stahl walking around, and she said, why are you so obsessed with inequality? And I said a lot of things, but at one point I said, because our democracy is at stake, and I said, what we, meaning we in Philanthropy, don't understand is that for the first time in American history, we have a downwardly mobile population of white Americans. We have never had that in American history. And so what 60 Minutes took that 15 seconds of me saying that, and that was at the top. And of course, some of my colleagues were like, is that what you really wanted, to be like at the top of all the things we're working on, And I said, I didn't control it. But at the end of the day, I think even the producers of 60 Minutes, I think that for them was something they don't get, that they didn't have a handle on.
So it was instructive.
And so it was instructive.
The tease was instructive.
The response was instructive. The data was instructive. It was all interesting. But I do feel that it's a huge reason why we find ourselves in the situation we're in. It's very complicated, and it's not the reason. It's not the only reason. But it has a lot to do.
And is this going to worsen in your eyes that, this, thankfully, what you acknowledged, which is exactly what's happening, is going to become worse so that our direction is going to remain the same?
Well, I think part of what has to happen is we have to have leadership that can offer us something to be for. And I think it is very hard because people are susceptible. But I do think leadership matters. And I think if we have leadership that seeks to find the common ground, of which there is a lot in this country, I think that the possibility is that the pendulum can swing.
Yeah, we come back.
I will never not be bullish on America.
Let me just ask this question then, Jim. I think you have some questions from the audience, but I think it would be instructive. As you know, we talked about the fires. You can't tell we're traumatized still at this point. But anyway, the communities responded. You went through Katrina, and then you went through Sandy. Is there anything from those experiences, before we go to the audience questions, that you can share with us when you were leading, whether you were with Rockefeller or Ford at the time, instructive for us?
Well, I think you all and what you've done is quite remarkable in that you don't pre-design what the strategy is. Yeah. The best and highest use of our time is to actually give and get the resources needed and to figure out the sort of strategy and the design of how those dollars get used in a collective way that is not a top-down way. To me, that has been the lesson. And to look for interventions that allow the systemic solutions to be the focus.
I have a question. How do we move from moral outrage to action collectively?
I think it's easy to be outraged. I mean, that Times piece that you wrote, that you read about, oh, he's so sunny and there's no doubt that my disposition is, but on a daily basis, I am enraged and outraged. But I had a teacher in the fourth grade I got into a big fight because this guy called me a sissy and I punched him and we were fighting. And my teacher, Mrs. Majors, dear Mrs. Majors, she said to me, you have to understand, Darren. Now, of course, it's a segregated school. Well, schools had just been integrated and I was in the advanced class anyway. And she said, you have to understand, little Negro boys who get in trouble, bad things will happen. Now, Mrs. Majors might be terminated today for telling about, but she did me a huge favor because she said, you have to get control of your anger and your rage, because I was enraged. And she was so right. Mrs. Majors is always on my shoulder.
Wait, but how'd you do it?
Because she just said, you have to figure out how to cope with your anger and your rage. And it was just great advice for this little fourth grader. And so, yes, we have moral outrage. Figure out a way to cope. Like, I have a whole strategy. I don't watch TV as much anymore. I mean, I have a whole set of things that allow me to cope.
What else? Give us some more of that.
No,
cope.
I mean, to cope and be productive.
I agree with the TV, by the way.
And be productive, right? I mean, everybody in this room, you're responsible for people. You have to turn up in a room. And you have to be on. You're not sitting against the wall like we were when we were 22-year-olds. No, you're like at the table and you have to do the work. And so that work can't be about being outraged. It has to be about executing for impact, right? And so the collective part of it is sharing that community, sharing that, and then building the collective will to say, okay, you're outraged, I'm outraged, she's outraged. What are we going to do, right? And to me, it's the ability to be in community and have conversations like that, but always resolve that it's not just about the swirl of being angry and enraged, that is not going to get you anywhere. And all the lessons over the years, I mean, my great Shiro, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, she always said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. But she didn't stop at being sick and tired. She got busy. And so, I think about that as a strategy and think about then how do I make sure other people who share my values, my concern, my anger, also share my commitment to wanting to get something done.
Are we closer or further away from actualizing a multiracial democracy?
Honestly, I think we've been set back in that aspiration. And it's not the first time in this country's history. If we know our history, it is never a straight line in this country on the issue of democracy, fully democracy. And so I have resolved that we have been set back and that it will probably take the rest of my lifetime, which is okay. That's not, to get us back to 75 or 80%. And I'm actually, I understand that. I mean, because this is the idea of America, right? It is this experiment, this noble experiment, and we're always working. We're never going to find perfection of it, but we're always going to be committed to working towards it. And that's what we have to do.
My son and daughter are in their 30s. Oh, I love this. That generation seems to be struggling with how to engage, how to have impact in the most effective way. What is your advice? That'd be Generation Z, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well,
30.
I think the advice is to be in community with the Generation Z, whatever the generation is, about these issues of impact, and understanding that where they are is different, that they live in a world that is enabled by social media, that provides them with a lot of access and burdens them with a lot of misinformation. And how to have an impact, how to make a difference. I think it is very hard for young people today to feel that they can have an impact, they can make a difference. But I will also tell you that one of the reasons I love doing commencements is because when you actually go on college campuses and when you speak to young people, as you all obviously do at USC, you actually are hopeful.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
they actually do have some good ideas.
They're going to be okay. Yeah.
And they're going to be okay
Yeah, they are.
if we allow them and get out of the way and not try to prescribe for them how they ought to live.
We didn't talk enough about your incredible impact on impact investments. So are you seeing impact investments generate market rate returns often?
Well, the data on mission investments, impact investments, is uneven. So just to answer that question, if what you want is a strictly market rate return, there are asset classes you can invest in. Affordable housing. Affordable housing is a pretty robust financial asset class. Now, partly because we've had government subsidy, tax credits, Section 8, other that make affordable housing investments an attractive asset class. So yeah, there are asset classes like that. And then there are others where the social impact, you have to figure out and be comfortable with a haircut on some level because you are seeking the social objective associated with investing in community development in Appalachia, or in the Valley where you've got a lot of poor immigrants living, right, and investing in those enterprises. So I think it depends is the answer. And I wish that weren't the answer because I'd love to be able to say that we've got a spreadsheet with metrics just like you do in other investments, and you can compare real estate to private equity, to venture, et cetera, but it's not that straightforward.
Not simple. State of play with trust-based philanthropy, and where are we headed?
I'm a believer in trust. And I believe that one of the reasons we created the BUILD program, one of the reasons to make general operating grants, make multi-year grants, is because it's an indication that you trust your grantees and that they probably are better positioned than you to dictate how those dollars are spent in their communities. Trust-based philanthropy as an idea, or in some instances an ideology, to my mind is a different question. Right? I mean, I believe, yes, that we should have trust-based philanthropy, but I don't believe that we can make grants. And that in a situation we were in at the foundation, that was a conversation about trust-based philanthropy. We were told that in order to make this a trust-based philanthropy set of grants, the grantees would have the option of not reporting anything to us. That's not an option, in my view. And so this group of grassroots organizations that I very much wanted the foundation to make grants, their understanding of trust-based philanthropy was that they would have the power to decide what information to share with us, if at all, because they would. That to me, I was not willing to accept. And so they said, well, then you don't believe in trust-based philanthropy. And I said, well, I guess I don't, because you got to send a report to the Ford Foundation. I mean, but you got to send a report to the Ford Foundation. So again, this is how in our world, our little liberal foundation bubble, these ideas that are become very compelling because they sound right and rhetorically they make us feel good, that I like to double click on before I sign on, because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding like halfway through.
You have been so generous with your time for all of us today.
You have been so generous sitting there listening to me.
Tell us, we can't let you go. Do you have to go, by the way?
Yes, I have to go. I have to go.
We don't want to go.
It is time to leave
Please
the Ford
don't go.
Foundation, and it is time.
No.
And as I said to my board chair at a town hall, when he was giving an update on the search for my successor, and there was all these people, oh, it's going to be so hard to fill Darren's shoes. And finally, I was so frustrated. And my board chair kept saying it, that when it was time for me to close the town hall, I said, I want to say one thing to all of you. I am taking my shoes with me. Stop talking about filling my shoes. I'm taking my shoes. You, board, your responsibility is to find a new pair of pumps or shoes, because there needs to be a different leader after 12 years who will bring his or her own shoes. And that's what you need to be looking for and investing in and getting excited about, because I think we often then mythologize and romanticize, oh, believe me, it has not been worthy of mythology, my 12 years at the Ford Foundation, I can assure you. But I did my little bit, and I was the steward, and given the privilege of stewarding this remarkable, amazing organization through this period of time. Now it's time for me to get off the stage.
But as you wrap, what is your prevailing feeling? Are you joyful? Are you sad? Are you relieved? Are you
I'm
all
all
those
of
things?
those things. I'm all of those things.
What have you got planned as we wrap up?
I have planned a fellowship at the American Academy in Rome, which I will probably end up not doing because I'm so neurotic about how to use my time. So I don't know. I'm hoping to do that. And what I want to do actually is, I don't ever want to be a CEO. I love being a CEO. Don't get me wrong. I love being a CEO. No. I love, Bob and I were talking about, when you're the president of a place like Ford or the Cal Endowment, I mean, these are big enterprises. You have to understand, you're running enterprises. You're not and so much of your time is spent on managing the enterprise. Board, lawyers, HR, and which, yes, you're all shaking because you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's less. I remember when I was a program director at Rockefeller, and I used to go on site visits, and I used to sit and for hours upon hours in a day with my program officers talking about all this. You don't do that anymore. And when you do go on a site visit, it's so performative and it's so organized and scripted. And so I want to get back to, I want to do philanthropy. So a part of my work is I want to continue in an advisory role. I'm going to work with maybe a couple of families. And just, again, I don't want to make grants. I don't want to have a big team. I just want to do advisory work. And I just want to cross some areas, do different advisory work. And then I've got the National Gallery, which is going to be a big challenge to be.
We're going to
to
pray for
manage
you.
the next few. Please pray for me.
We will
at the
pray
National
for you.
Gallery.
Can we thank
Need your
you,
prayers.
Darren? Thank you, thank you,
all
thank
very
you.
much.